All right, so welcome to the Defend Container Security Group meeting. I'll go ahead and kick it off since I've got the first few items here. So for planning breakdown, I wanted to talk about our MVC of getting an initial security policy UI out. And for that, let me go ahead and share my screen. So just to walk through the requirements for this, I tried to make this as small and minimal as I possibly could. Andy's going to be doing some research for a much broader vision for the policy UI, in the long term, but we wanted to just get something out there so that we had something that was working that we could start getting active feedback on and start getting identifying customers who are using the feature so that we can engage with them and get their feedback as we continue to iterate in this policy UI. So again, this was really scoped down just to be an absolute minimal piece. The long-term vision is that this policy management UI will be the same UI for policy management across products. So you're not going to have a separate UI for Cilium versus Mod Security, versus even secure policies could fit in here at some point down the road. But for now, to keep it simple, we're focusing just on container network security, so secure Cilium policies. And to begin with, we're just going to expose policies that exist. So we're going to show them in the UI, let you view whether the policies are enabled or disabled, and give you one action item, which is to enable or disable the policies. So, there's a lot of notable functionality that's missing from this list. There's no ability to add a policy or delete a policy, or, group a policy together. There's no two-step approval process. There's a lot that's still missing here, but that's intentional because we want to get something out the door. Also, I broke this down into two sub-issues. So the first issue is just focused on this first bullet point, which is viewing policies that exist. And then the second issue is allowing for enabling and disabling, which I had a brief discussion with Arthur yesterday. It sounds like that may require some upstream changes to the Cilium project to allow for that. But those two issues are linked here as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Andy to show some early designs. This is still in the workflow design stage, but we wanted to get some early eyes on the thoughts that we have for this piece.
There's two flows that I was exploring. And the first one would be enabling or editing policies through an MR process, so we could get that two-step kind of audit trail. And they both kind of start with the same information architecture. So in threat monitoring, we'll add a new tab for policies. And then if the user decides to view their policies, they'll click on that tab and they'll get a list of their policies that we can abstract from Cilium. And well, the name is kind of already gotten free from the policy itself. We can tell if it's enabled or disabled, when it was last modified, in the merge request it was last modified. I realize there's more technical hurdles to that, but this would be an ideal point in time to have this information. Clicking on a policy will open a drawer where the user can view the policy itself and see a note that if they make changes, it will trigger the commit process and the pipeline itself to run. They can also copy it, maybe.
Andy, I don't know if it matters from, it probably does matter from a design perspective. I think what we decided was that we didn't want to trigger a pipeline on a change. We wanted to retrieve the policy live from the cluster and push it live to the cluster, because then that's where the policy really lives, is in the current configuration. And if somebody changed the policy and then via the UI, and then they did a new pipeline rollout, it actually could overwrite the previous policy. So I don't know if that changes the UI at all, but I think that's where we settled.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't change much. That's in the non-MR solution. But just want to quickly wrap this up, because there are benefits, I believe, to having this auditability. However, we can get it in. It doesn't have to use our pipeline process, but if we decide that that's the only way to do it, and the user's like, if this isn't audible, then we can't use it, right? So if there's pushback, we're prepared. Or if there's stuff from research, we can also be prepared. I know the limitations of how Cilium enacts policies can be there.
The question is this is more Kubernetes/Cilium question. Is it one set of policies per project, or is it one set of policies per Kubernetes cluster, or per namespace per Kubernetes cluster, or like what is it's a Cilium policy per what? I just want to make sure
all of the policies that you see in this list are going to be tied towards one deployment of Cilium, which you have one deployment of Cilium per cluster.
Is one Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so we don't need to have like Kubernetes cluster listing or anything like that.
Yeah, so the policies themselves get applied at the namespace level. So each policy is only going to apply to one namespace, but everything in this list is going to be across the whole cluster.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So the other, I know I'm not letting you go forward, Andy. Sorry, but your mock-ups here make you think of lots of good questions that I wouldn't have thought of without them. So another is that the policy is a YAML file, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that right? Yeah. So YAML files are not easy to get right. So should we plan? The users can get them, make syntax errors, and even
so
if
we're not letting them edit it here in this iteration. This is a view only.
This is view only. Okay.
Right. So remember, I mentioned we're leaving out a lot of stuff right now. Right now, this is purely a view the policy, and that's it.
View and enable and disable, but not edit.
Correct. You can't edit. You can't delete. You can't create a new policy.
Okay. Awesome. So when we get to policies that they can edit, we'll want to have a check validity, which is not
Right.
easier said than done, but it'll be really valuable to customers so that it can validate it, and maybe even a graph. This might be going over maybe even a graphical UI to be able to edit it, but that's even more. But at least something to validate the YAML file.
We started exploring creating a kind of like a conditional semi-Zapier-like experience for creating and managing policies. And we could also do some type of simulation before the policy is committed so that we know if it's valid or not.
Yeah. And it might just be submit the policy, and if Cilium rejects it, then immediately go back to the old policy and tell the user why Cilium rejected it. That might be a way to do it, is to flip it to the new policy with an ability to roll back to the old one if Cilium complains about it. That actually might be a lot simpler than running our own validator. But anyway, that's not in scope for today. Apologies, Andy.
So the only change here would be reverting to this non-MR solution. Right now, you're still seeing the MR solution with like, it's a button we get from kind of issues, and making an MR from that. It's changed a little bit. The logic, of course, is much deeper than the UI. But when we go to this non-MR solution, the button just changes to save changes. Of course, easier said than done, but there's not a huge impact to the experience or flow, either or case. So it's kind of built.
So just to elaborate on that a little bit, that MR solution works really well if they're using Auto DevOps. The non-MR solution works really well if they're not using Auto DevOps. So as you explained, Wayne, there's potential, we've got policy in two places. If they're using Auto DevOps, they now have policy as it is stored in Cilium, and they also have policy as it's stored in the auto deploy values.yaml file in the GitLab repo. And so this second non-MR solution that you're looking at now, this would push the changes directly into Cilium. But the challenge is that it's not replicating those changes in the auto deploy values.yaml file that's stored in the GitLab container management project repo. And so if they go and rerun their CI/CD pipeline, it's going to overwrite any changes that they made in this non-MR approach, unless they copy unless they copy the policy definition over into their auto deploy values.yaml file before they rerun that pipeline. So, it's a little bit challenging because there are two places to edit it, and both workflows that Andy has here come with the downside that it solves for one of the two ways to edit the policy, but not both. I think longer term, we're going to need to have a UI that accounts for both. But for now, considering that GitLab-wide usage of Auto DevOps is very low per all the data that we have, the solution that I explored with Arthur, and I haven't had a chance to discuss yet with Andy, is to go with this non-MR workflow, since that's going to account for 99.5% of all customers. And for those other 0.5, if we can detect if they do have Auto DevOps in place, then when they hit that Save Changes button, we just give them a message of some sort that says, before you rerun your CI/CD pipeline, you need to copy this new policy definition that shows enabled or disabled into your auto deploy values.yaml. Otherwise, these changes are going to get overwritten when the pipeline runs again. So it's not a perfect solution for now, but it'll let us address 99.5% of our customers with a minimal amount of work. And then we can come back and revisit that MR workflow later for the customers who are using Auto DevOps.
Is the V2 managed apps approach of having this project incumbent on people using Auto DevOps?
I don't know the full answer to that. I got the sense that it was not a hard requirement, but I could be wrong there.
Okay.
I don't know if Philippe or Lucas or someone else on the call has more insights.
So in terms of how we report metrics, Auto DevOps strictly means ones that have no CI file. So it's something that's generated via Auto DevOps, like literally like the full magic pipeline. But since it is composable, people who just use like the auto deploy portion of Auto DevOps, that would not count towards that. So you can still use those subcomponents there, which would include like usage of the cluster management projects.
Okay.
So just for the sake of time, worth noting, I have a follow-on issue that I'm working on putting together where we'll apply a default or base policy pack for Selenium, because out of the gate, this list will be empty, but I plan to address that later after we get the initial UI done. Also, there's a related research issue on unified policy management to help look into some tools that might help us create a little bit more seamless experience and let us bridge rules and actions across technologies. But are there any other questions on the more immediate MVC policy management UI that we talked about? Comments, feedback?
Overall, looks great to me. Thanks, Andy, for putting together these, and and I think great conceptual plans where we started with the SAM. It's good stuff.
I just have two things to add on this. I find it just a bit weird that it's kind of hidden in threat monitoring. That's not a place where I would expect to update these policies. So
Yeah, that's
the first.
To address that point quickly, sorry to cut you off, is that so Kyle is also working on policies for license compliance, so license policies and dependency scanning policies. And they've also gone with a tabbed approach. In 13.1, when we kicked this research off for this larger like policy capital P initiative, I'll be collaborating with him and pretty much the rest of the teams to think about bringing this out into the navigation into security policies. We didn't do that for this MVC because if someone clicks on security policies and they say, oh, these are just Cilium policies, that doesn't make sense. Those aren't security policies. I didn't want to confuse the users at that point, just for the MVC.
Right, so the long-term vision is to move it out. That location is a temporary holding spot.
And And my second point is on the intended user, so that's just a very small thing. There's only Sam in there, and I think Sam is not going to use this UI at all. Maybe Devon, the DevOps engineer, but I would imagine that the security team is not putting policies in place. It's the role of the DevOps team, so they will just review the policies that are in place. So maybe we should keep that in mind while designing this feature, so that we could have a quick overview of the policies in place. That could be the file directly. I think the security team would be fine with that, but mostly the DevOps team are going to use the UI because they will be in charge of updating the policies and the shape of the application. Does it make sense?
That makes sense. I from everything I've seen, I don't agree with you, but I don't have enough research to say that you're wrong. So you certainly might be right. I think I'm willing to add in the DevOps engineer there as a potential one. And maybe as we do additional research there, we can get clarity on exactly who is the persona that'll be using this. My inclination is to believe that it is the security team, not the DevOps team. But I don't have enough research to say that with absolute certainty.
Yeah, I think we're both right. It depends on the maturity level of the organization. So less mature companies will probably push this into the DevOps role, and more mature security-minded organizations will put this off into like security operations role. My assumption.
Yeah, I think you might be right with that, Andy. All right, any other comments or feedback on that one? I know that took the majority of the time, but that was item number 1 on the agenda and the most important to get through today. So I also have an issue in there related to some terminology cleanup. Let me share my screen again. This came back as a result of feedback from Sid. He just wants us to avoid referencing the open source projects directly in the GitLab UI. He's fine with them being there in the documentation, but he wants them to be removed from the UI itself. I noted in the notes that, you know, this is a little bit inconsistent with the way the rest of the items in, you know, managed apps are listed out, because they reference the open source technologies directly. I might push back on this more, other than the way Andy is headed with the feature. It's moving more of this management out of the GitLab Managed Apps UI and into that security and compliance submenu. So I'm okay with making these changes, but this is just, you know, a relatively straightforward issue for somebody to just go through and scrub any occurrences of these open source technologies and replace them in the UI itself. Questions, comments, feedback on that? Cool. Research issues. So with the time we've got left here, there was that evaluation. I just wanted to call out a reminder that really we want to address, the goal of this is to find a way to address the required capabilities and as many of the nice to have list as possible. I'm flexible on what the end solution is, as long as we can meet the product requirements and the customer requirements. So that was just a quick call out. And then it looks like asynchronously, Wayne, you responded here. You know, how are we progressing? What's the timeline for us to, you know, kind of close this out and decide on next steps? Does next week work for everyone? And if so, Wayne, do you want to schedule that?
Yeah, I can do that. I think it's about time. I don't want to get into it today because it's definitely more than a 7-minute discussion. But Alan, you've been deep into it for a while, which is great. And Zamir, I know you started on a little bit later than Alan. Do you think you'll be ready, Zamir, as well, to discuss sometime next week?
Yep. Yeah, we had some courses this week, like Postgres, and I'm taking the app security course as well. So later on next week would be good to put some stuff together.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll get it scheduled.
Philippe, I was just looking for an update on this issue. I know we're short on time here, so I'm fine if you don't if we want to just handle this asynchronously, but it'd be great to get an update here because I do see this as a priority, and would love to get an idea of where we're at. With the time left, I just want to cover this other research issue that I have slated for 13.1, which is unified policy management. So this idea actually came from Philippe looking at OPA, or Open Policy Agent. But in the end, going back to that discussion about the longer term vision for that policy management console, it would be really nice if we could abstract away the individual technologies that we're using from the end user and just let them write policy to do the things that they want to do. So thinking about Cilium, for example, they might say, I want to protect this namespace, or I want to write a pod, a rule that governs traffic coming in and out of the pod, but they shouldn't have to say, I'm going to use Cilium to do this. They should be able to just write the rule that they want, and then we should know which technology is applicable in that case and farm it out to the technologies that are appropriate. It would be even better if we could write cross technology policies. And, I don't know if this is too pie in the sky or out of the scope of what OPA does, but it would be awesome if I could say, when I see, 5 violations in mod security here, and somebody also violates this policy in Cilium down here, then I want to take this action down in, Waza or Falco or whatever other technology, right? So if we can start to even mix and match the technologies in the way we write our policy, really I view policy as a big if-then statement, if this, then that. So, if we can start to mix and match the ifs and then together, that would be sort of the holy grail of policy management for me. So this one, is very interesting to me. I think it's well worth spending some engineering cycles just doing a quick research spike to see what's out there and what would be required and how far away from that, grandiose vision that we would get if we did decide to embed one of these technologies. So I don't know if this one needs like any more breakdown where it is just a research issue, or if we're good to just go ahead and move it to scheduling for 13.1. What are your thoughts on that, Wayne?
Anything about it more? Research, definitely. So one thing to note is that mods, and I don't know how this is impacted by this or not. So mod security and Cilium do not have a management UI as part of those open source projects. So a unified policy manager, definitely makes sense at one place to configure those things. Waza does. It has actually a pretty extensive UI for configuring it. And so I don't know if this is maybe part of a different discussion of this one, but we may want to have a Waza on-off button, but I don't think we want to recreate the entire UI for Waza or portions of it, but instead might want to have a single sign-on to Waza so that the user can click on, go to the Waza UI, and then you don't have to log in separately, or something along those lines, which makes it not a unified user experience between them. However, we spent a very long time rebuilding what has built for very little value if we did that. Especially if we rebuilt the whole thing, which we likely wouldn't.
Yeah, that makes great sense. I mean, I guess what I'm hoping that this piece will solve is letting me write policy that spans products. So if I'm writing a Waza specific policy, maybe we have that, UI in Waza, but what if I want a policy that takes an action in Waza based off of something that I observed up in mod security, and can Open Policy Agent help with that?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know, but I think it's worth the research spike into it just to see, what would we get if we use a tool like this?
Definitely worth the research spike. Absolutely.
Was Waza leveraging?
All right.
Kibana, or is it have its own dedicated UI? Those might be two different things.
Can you repeat that, Andy?
I think what was I haven't looked too much into was but is it its UI is really just Kibana, like this elk stack, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's only like they using the Kibana components, and they just use that to provide everything on the screen. So I believe they do not have really extensive solution on their site. They're just reusing some dashboard elements.
There's probably some things we can port in and steal from, and like syslog do export to.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. I know we're up on time. If there are more questions or comments or feedback, feel free to send it to me asynchronously.
Good stuff.
Thanks.